I called neurology at that point and said, I'm pretty sure, that she had an infantile spasm. Should I bring her into the emergency room? And they said, no, we'll just come in and we'll schedule her for an EEG and possibly start her on Thereault. And so their first line was they wanted to start her on Topamax. And because she could also, because of the ability to also control simple partials on that. She never had hypsarrhythmia, so they would always fight with me. Was it really
infantile spasms?
Was it really infantile spasms? They would always do these outpatient EEGs, or bring her in. She'd fall asleep during the EEG. We'd, leave. She had hundreds of. I know that dance every week for that. Every week, sometimes multiple times a week.
So you're trying to nail down the seizures?
Yeah, that first time, and then I said, okay, we're going to start her on Thereault. So we started her on Theault. I gave her first dose, and she fell asleep shortly after. But she really fell asleep. Fell asleep to the point where scary. Nothing was waking her up. I called neurology, and I talked to neurology, and they're like, you need to put something, you need to, rub on her sternum. I said,
sternum.
I've already done that. I've already rubbed on her sternum with my knuckles, and she's not waking up. And so they say, get an ice pack and put it on her foot. And if she doesn't wake up, put it on her chest. And if she doesn't wake up, bring her into the emergency room. So, no, she didn't wake up, but she woke up when I brought her to, she woke up in the emergency room. And she was still super sleepy. Her head was lagging back. And so they diagnosed her with Theault toxicity after one dose. So they didn't want to put her on Theault. So then their line of...
Was she still on she was still on the Topamax, and they added...
Yeah, she was on other medications. They added Theault. At this point in time, where 9 years later, they should have taken her off other medications and kept her on Theault.
They didn't know.
They didn't know. Their line of story is that they didn't think she had infantile spasms. It was always a question. So she's about 5 months, 6 months at this point. I guess, fast forward to 10 months old, and she is having multiple types of seizure.
And she's on is for seizure
she's
meds?
I think
you don't remember.
At the time were Keppra, Topamax, Lamictal, and a couple other Klonopin multiple times a day. Yeah. She was on, and we would cycle meds in, and then it was just, I was on the phone every day with neurology. She was having simple partials, complex partials, her eyes were doing, having just focal seizures with her eyes. She was definitely, now I know, I knew then, but I would fight with them all the time about the spasm issue. She was having tonic seizures, just almost every type of seizure you could think of an infant having. And at 10 months old, she progressed to having tonic-clonic seizures, sometimes up to 5 a day, where and turning blue. And so at that point in time, I'm trying to get her into Boston Children's, and I can't get her in. I'm calling, trying to get her in. I'm trying to get her. Connecticut's recommending surgery, but they want her to see Dr. Weiner, who at that time was in New York, and our insurance wouldn't cover it. So couldn't see Dr. Davinsky, which means you can't see, neurosurge there. You can't see, and it didn't matter. Our insurance was not going to cover anyone in New York.
Mm-hmm.
They would cover Boston. So, neurology isn't helping me. They're not calling them for me. So I cold called neurosurge at Boston Children's, and they took pity on me. They were like, this poor mother, you can't cold call neurosurgery. And so,
good job.
So they were trying to get me in to neurology. And so at that point in time, after, I think there was just a day where she had so many tonic-clonics, I called neurology and I said, look, I'm either going to drive her to Boston Children's and go to the ER and say that you guys are not treating her properly, demand to be seen there. And they said, well, that's not how it goes. You have to wait for an appointment. And I said, or I'm going to drive her to your emergency room, and you're going to admit her, and you're going to place her on the ketogenic diet. Because they had said that they would put her on the ketogenic diet, but it was going to take a month or two to get the blood work done.
Oh, my goodness.
So she was the first child ever emergently placed on the ketogenic diet at Connecticut Children's.
Wow.
Because I was stubborn.
Uh-huh.
And I demanded it. It took 2 weeks inpatient because they cycle the doctors. So you get a different doctor on, who is basically, one day you'll have one doctor and they'll be on the floor for a couple days, and then you'll get a different doctor. And so one doctor would say, okay, we'll start the ketogenic diet. And then there was a doctor.
Because if I remember, you have to kind of go through like this withdrawal thing in the hospital, and then they start.
Well, they
do
blood work to make sure there's no metabolic differences in your child that would prohibit them from doing the ketogenic diet. And so they were doing the blood work, and then we that only takes like a day or two. But they also, there was a doctor who came on service and said, there's no way, the ketogenic diet is unpalatable. Like, there's just also this, it's like,
oh, man.
Depending on who comes on service, it's like
no consistency.
There's really not any consistency. So I think I escalated it to like the patient advocate at the hospital and said, look, you're doing this. You're also calling and getting us an appointment in Boston. And we're not leaving the hospital until you do this. Because they kept trying, that doctor tried to discharge us. And I said, she's still having 5 seizures a day where we have to give her oxygen in the hospital. You're not discharging us this way. So they did start the ketogenic diet.
They got it started.
And that was the last time she actually stopped having tonic-clonics the very first day.
Really?
That she was on the ketogenic diet.
Wow.
And she stayed on the ketogenic diet for from 10 months to 3.5 years old. So
that's a long time, and I know how labor intensive that is.
Yeah. So she was basically at 10 months old only sitting up. She had just started sitting up. And she went within like a month was crawling, pulling to stand.
Yeah.
And her development took off. So
and her seizures were they managed with the keto diet and meds?
They were
was she still
managed, and she had some breakthroughs. They were managed for a while, but we completely knocked out the tonic-clonic seizures.
Mm-hmm.
We ended up completely switching care over to Boston Children's, to the clinic there, but also their clinic we had to use at the time, they were using a completely separate doctor for the ketogenic diet. So we're kind of in limbo because there was one neurologist for the ketogenic diet, the different neurologist for TS. It was
Wow,
very,
sounds like piecemeal a little bit.
yeah, it was very piecemeal and it was difficult. And she was about probably around like 15, 16 months, she started to have these head nods, and like they were like serial head nods.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, there's something, she would also wake up from a nap and just like flap over and kind of get stuck. And I was like, these are seizures. Like, we need to treat these are seizures. And Boston, the ketogenic diet neurologist was like, these aren't seizures. I showed them videos. And this is back, like, this is not the 90s, but this is like 2010 when, I didn't have an iPhone at that point in time.
Yeah.
I had like a digital camcorder that I had to like set up in her room and record everything and then email it. So she was like, these aren't seizures. I don't think these are seizures. We did EEGs, and by then, she's 18 months old. They're saying it's a heart issue. It must be syncope. So then we're doing heart monitor.
Oh, wow.
That's not showing anything. I'm like, can we, let's change things going on with her seizure medication. Let's change the ratio in her diet. Like, there's something, it's definitely seizure. They were saying the head nods weren't seizure. They admitted her for a week-long EEG. They didn't see any correlate, so it wasn't seizure. Things changed again, and I'm probably around, so she's between like 16 and 18 months, and I'm pregnant with our second child at this point. So I was like 37 weeks pregnant to where like she's admitted for a week-long EEG, and finally they say with the head nods, well, and this was a different neurologist on service again, and he said, well, we see a small slowing on the EEG when she has the head nod, so we think that these are juvenile spasms. So we're going to increase her Keppra. And I just about screamed. I said, no, we're not. You're going to start her on Sabril. And like, this is like, I was 37 weeks pregnant, sleeping in a chair for a week. I could have about murdered this person because of all those reasons.
Oh my gosh.
And because you never want to be right about something like that. You never want to be right about the fact that your child had uncontrolled infantile spasms for that long.
No.
And the fact that you've been fighting at a hospital like Boston Children's for them to recognize the fact that your child's had infantile spasms for that long. And then for them to say, let's put them on Keppra. And the doctors were blocking us from starting Sabril because her ketogenic diet doctor said, she uses her eyes. We can't put her on Sabril.
Oh my God. Like, are you serious?
Yeah.
Oh,
I was like,
goodness.
you have to be kidding me right now. So when we left the hospital, and that's in the week afterwards, they're saying, she said she uses her eyes. We can't start her on Sabril. I said, no, we are starting her on Sabril. And I was like, that's it. I called Mass General. I said, we just had an EEG. They won't start her on Sabril. We need an appointment. And they are great when they hear spasms won't start on Sabril. They gave us an appointment right away. But at the same time, I'm not putting all my eggs in one basket. I called every single possible, like, higher up in the hospital that I could, and emailed every single
at Mass General or
at Boston Children's, every single advocate I possibly could in that hospital to get Kaylee started on Sabril. And her neurologist was not pleased about that whatsoever, the ketogenic diet neurologist, but she
Mm-hmm.
was started on Thereault. So I called back Mass General. I said, thank you very much for squeezing us in, but you can give us an appointment,